Welcome to the Authentic Man podcast. I am your host, David Chambers. This is a podcast for men who want more and less from life. More deep connection, more emotional intelligence, more self-awareness, and more great sex. And less heartache, less conflict, less overthinking, and less stress. Creating dating lives, sex lives, and relationships that are incredible and authentic. My deepest goal is that you, the listener, can take away what you hear in this podcast and apply it to your life so that you can experience greater happiness, transformational growth, deeper relationships, and profound sexual intimacy. I believe that as men, we are capable of so much more depth than we are shown or led to believe. So join me as we get deep into this. Welcome back to the Authentic Man podcast with myself, David Chambers. Welcome to episode 84, where I'm going to be talking with Alex Manzi, a wonderful coach, a wonderful human being, a wonderful man, about self-love for men and the importance of self-love, self-care, and as men, us looking after ourselves and showing ourselves the love that we want from the outside. Maybe that would be normally coming from a partner or friends or, work colleagues or whatever it be, but actually giving ourselves the love that we want, we need, and we really, truly deserve. It's a really beautiful and inspirational conversation because, when it comes to self-love, a lot of the time we think, that's not for men. Men don't do self-love. Men don't need love. And all these kind of toxic stereotypes that have been kind of conditioned and programmed into us through the media, through television, through books, through all sorts of things. And, much is in Time Podcast, which is about redefining what masculinity is and what it means to be a man, what it means to have masculine relationships and masculine sexuality. So this really is in line with that. And Alex is a coach, and he hosts a wonderful podcast called In the Moment with Alex Manzi. A bit like me, put your name in your podcast, make it very simple. And he's also an author of a book called The Search for Clarity. And he's really been able to turn his life around, from suffering really deep depression and real unhappiness in his life to building a life where he's living on his own terms, doing the work he loves doing, a life of happiness and clarity. And through his coaching, he really inspires and helps other people to create positive change in their life. And he's a great man. I've been following him for a while. I've been enjoying his videos and his work. So I was really happy to get him on the podcast. I really love to have powerful, introspective men on the podcast because I think that's what we need to see more and more as men. And, something that I've experienced of spending time with these sorts of men has really helped change my life infinitely for the better. And I guess to tell you a bit about the episode, we touched on some things like, self-love for men, why men need self-love, self-love practices that men can take on that feel, in line with our masculinity and our expanding our view of masculinity as well. And we delve into why we often see that self-love is an unmanly thing. That's a really interesting piece of the podcast there as well. And we get into self-love versus self-discipline. And this is a really great thing because often as men, we want to be disciplined, right? And we can be okay with discipline. But self-love, sometimes we might feel that there's like an either or, that there's a competition, that they can't be in balance, in harmony together. So we really delve into that and talk about our own experiences with self-love and self-discipline. So there's a lot in the episode. It's a really great episode, right? I've edited. I love listening to them. It's an incredible listen. So you're going to enjoy it. But before we get into that, I think a couple of things I want to say. I've just come back from an incredible men's retreat, actually. It's the first time I've ever been on a men's retreat solely for men. There was 24 men there, including the facilitators. It was run by a company called Men Without Masks, and it was amazing. I'm just filled with this admiration and love for men in ways that I didn't know was possible, actually. I was saying this to kind of my partner, and she asked me about it last night. Also, I just said, I saw men show up in ways, express themselves in ways, show love and care for themselves and other men in ways I never thought that men could do. You know, it was a really powerful retreat, and hats off to the guys that ran it, Craig White, Dave, I don't know Dave's surname, Dave, Martin and Matt. It was really amazing, really heart-opening, really full of discipline as well, you know, and hard work. It was amazing, and I highly recommend it to many men to reach out to those guys and involve yourself in the retreat, because it's life-changing work. And, you know, when I'm sitting here telling you it's fucking amazing, I'm not beating around the bush. It was really, really amazing. So that's something that I've been up to the last 5 or 6 days, depending when you're listening to this, obviously. And also something that's come up, which is really going to be beautiful, right? So this is something for couples. This is a workshop, course, retreat that I'm running alongside my partner and the Secret Yoga Club and the Temple of the Feminine. You know, that's myself, David, also my partner, Gabrielle from Secret Yoga Club, and Amy from the Temple of Feminine, who you can listen to in one of the past episodes on here. And we basically put together a wonderful retreat to help people nourish and awaken your senses and delve deeper into intimacy inside your relationships. So this is a couples retreat. You know, it's the first time I'm doing something like this. You know, if you're listening to this and you've been to any of my Tantra workshops, you know that there's a real next level of depth of intimacy, both romantic intimacy, sexual intimacy, and emotional intimacy that we never experience in relationship, because we don't even realize, we don't know how to get there. We don't know what to do. We don't know what practices to do. So in this retreat, we're going to really take you deeper into your relationship with yourself, the intimacy you have with yourself, and the intimacy you have with your partner. And I know what's coming in the retreat. So I'm telling you, it's going to be incredible. It's going to be a really beautiful experience. You know, if you found that in the last, year or so in your relationship, there's a drift. Maybe there's the stress of working from home. Maybe it's the kind of stresses of COVID and, all those sorts of things. And you feel that you'd like to be more connected. You'd like to be having more sex. You'd like to be having deeper, more loving sex. You'd like to be having more passionate sex. You'd like to just feel each other more deeply, in the ways that you did maybe early in a relationship. Then this is a perfect retreat for you. And we're running it between the 19th of July to the 22nd. And it's open to couples. If you're interested, I've got the link in the show notes below. And if you're super interested, feel free to drop me a DM on Instagram or, wherever you hang out, you can find me, or you can send me an email at hello@theauthenticman.net. To find out more about that, but I really highly recommend that. And I think there's limited spots. I think we're limited to just 10 spots for 10 couples. And I know that a few of them are already gone, even though we've only just put it out, because it's that good. So if you're interested, get in contact or hit the link and just go and book yourself in. It's going to be amazing. I think that's all. I'm just filled with so much kind of gratitude at the moment for the work I've been doing the last 5 days and getting this retreat together. It's just like, feel like my own dreams are coming true in terms of the things that I'm doing with my life. And that's just come through, various journeys over the last year or so, through everything, through coaching people to being coached myself. I'm just feeling, joyful. And actually, on the subject of coaching, if you're a man and you're listening to this, and some of the topics you've listened to in my past episodes, or even this one, really resonate with you, and you're feeling called to get some coaching, feeling called to step into a new man, to be more of the man you want to be, the man you look in the mirror and think, I'd like to be different. I'd like to be more expansive. I'd like to be more connected. Then get in contact with me and I'll tell you how I can help you through coaching or even some of the workshops I've got coming up. So we'll just get into the episode, and just delve deeper into that. So, introduce this episode of The Authentic Man with myself, David Chambers. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, back with another wonderful episode of the podcast. And I'm really happy to introduce our guest today. He's a man who I've been kind of following on Instagram for quite a while and really love his relaxed and mindfulness approach to just daily living, and I think it's something that we can all add a bit more. I know definitely for myself, I consciously and continuously trying to bring more mindfulness into my day. But I'd like to introduce to you Alex Manzi, coach, podcaster, and author.
Hello, thanks for having me, man. I'm looking forward to diving into some deep conversations today. So appreciate you having me.
Yeah, it's great to see you. And we're going to talk about self-love for men. So I feel like it's a topic that when we think of self-love, there's like a lot of content out there for women about how they can, give themselves more self-love and feel better. But when I talk to friends about self-love, like other men, it's often, I'm met with like, bruv, what do you mean self-love? Like, I'm just out here going gym, or
Mm.
I'm, trying to eat well. We don't, I don't know, there's this resistance to the word self-love. But I'd like to start with Alex, is actually to ask you about, how did you come to do the work that you do now? Like what drew you to that?
Mm. I really, I think that the honest answer is just my own journey. Like I spent most of my 20s very unhappy, late teens to like mid 20s very unhappy, and well, it turns out depressed. And I got to a point in my life where I just decided that I couldn't carry on and didn't want to carry on how I was living. And that kind of puts you into a box of like, well, if you don't want to carry on living how you're living, you either stop living, like quite literally, by doing something that I wouldn't even think of in a million years now, or by changing something. And
Mm,
my the most realistic option to me was to change something. And that just naturally sent me on a course of like self-development and trying to understand more about myself and my emotions and my place in this world, and trying to unpick all the things that as a man growing up you kind of have learned somehow, and trying to like just get a better understanding of all of that and what it means. And just like reading loads, listening to loads of podcasts, like exploring things like meditation, reading different, practices and texts, like, bit different philosophies or different spiritual teachings, and just really like diving into like the world of, you know, self-help, self-development, I guess. And then off of the back of that, I started my podcast, which was originally called Dreamer's Disease back in the day, which is now called In the Moment with Alex Manzi. And I I started it because I wanted to help people feel inspired about their work. That was the original kind of premise, was I wanted people to be motivated about the work they've done, because I always felt like I was never had that motivation. I was never inspired by it. And then I found a kind of path within my past social media work that I really enjoyed, and I wanted to kind of inspire people and hear people's stories and what really, inspired them to do the work that they've done, etc., etc. And then it kind of just evolved over time as my own development and my own learning evolved into more like understanding about the self versus, just work. It's like the work becomes a part of your life, but it's not your life. So I was more focused on the life element and who the person was. So the conversation started to get a bit deeper and a bit more broad. And then off the back of that, people just started to, and I mean people that I worked with and people kind of in my life just started to see me as like this wise person that I didn't feel like I was at all. And people would often come to me for like help and advice. And when I worked, I'd always be one of the people who would want to like help out the interns or the people who worked, who are new in, in jobs and stuff. I'd always want to give them advice and help where I could. And then naturally just people would, mention things to me like, oh, you should try coaching and this, that, and the other. And then I spoke to an old acquaintance who I did work with many years ago on a marketing project. And he's a life coach that's been coaching for like 15 years. And he started kind of like mentoring me in like the coaching, about the coaching industry, and just kind of went from there. It kind of all just unfolded naturally. It wasn't like one day I woke up and I was like, I want to be a coach. It just kind of like I was inquisitive about it all, and it just, things have just unfolded. Like I didn't you know plan to start a podcast many years ago. I didn't plan to become a coach when I was like 5-6 years. It just kind of happened in a way.
I can definitely resonate with that. It just kind of, people say sometimes, oh, it chose you, it chooses you, but it kind of unfolds outside of your awareness. It just kind of falls into your life in a way.
Hmm.
It just kind of comes in around. It seems like it becomes obvious, the next obvious step. A similar journey for myself. It was like, oh yeah, I don't. There was a point where I actively didn't want to coach people. I'd coached people years and years ago, and I didn't want to. And the guy I used to work with, he came to me. He's like, I really need some help with my dating life. I'm really not connecting in the way I want to. I said, oh, I know you. Yeah, this is the price. I'll do it. And we did like about 2 months of coaching. At the end, I was like, I fucking love this.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I
love
mean, I
this.
think that's a journey that most coaches go through, and whatever, be it a sports coach, be it a business coach, a dating coach, a life coach, whatever. Like, I think every coach goes through that phase of like, I really want to do this. Oh no, I really don't like it. I do really enjoy it, and I can see that I really help people. And then it just like you kind of flirt with the three things all the time. But yeah, it is amazing once you start and you start to kind of see the transformation that you help people with, because my whole thing is like focusing on helping people live like a happier, more fulfilling life. And it's like a real focus on understanding the way that we interact with our own thinking, and then how in turn that helps us interact with the world around us. So it's about helping people understand that and see the blocks that they have, see the blind spots that they have, let them see the excuses and the rubbish that they come up with to tell themselves they can't do stuff, and just like help them work through all of that to then create the transformation that they're looking for. And it's like when you do that and you see like the transformation unfolding in front of you, it's like, yeah, this is, how can you not love this?
Yeah, it's amazing when you're able to see someone like evolve as a person and start to build their conscious awareness of what stories and what narratives they tell themselves. And I always find there's a moment with a client where they start telling you a story and they say something like, yeah, and this thing was happening, and then I saw how I was creating this all in my mind, and I took a step back and I chose to take a different option to what I normally would. And at that point, you're like, yes, this is serious progress,
Yeah, because I think, and that's the bit I find really interesting, and that's why I focus a lot on like the way we interact with our thinking, because like what I've come to understand really is that the way we interact with life around us, people, places, situations, events, it's all through our own thinking. Like our thinking creates the reality that we live. Like if you feel like, something has happened to you and it's made you feel bad, then okay, there's my toe on the desk, right? Okay, I've stubbed my toe. Oh, I feel really bad. Like I'm such an idiot. I can't believe I did that. Like they're only thoughts that have been created in my own mind, because I could quite easily have stubbed my toe on the desk and gone, oh, I did it again, silly me, and carried on without giving it any more of a thought. But by chasing the negative thinking, or even sometimes the positive thinking, you're just creating that reality for yourself. And that's only happening within your own thinking. Like it's not me that stubbed my toe that's caused me to feel unhappy or annoyed or angry. It's my thinking around the situation that has created that. And it's like when you can really dive deep into that with someone and let them see how that's showing up in different areas of their life, it's like super powerful stuff, man.
Very, very powerful, really powerful. It reminds me of a saying one of my mentors had, is like, your focus creates your reality. It's just like, that's it. Your focus creates your reality. And it just continually happens like in your life. And I really see it for myself, and I see it with people that I work with. It's when we be able to see that, it's like really you can start shifting from this kind of victimhood that we often live in. Like, oh, these things are happening to me. Oh, I stubbed my toe. I always stub my toe. It's the bloody chair. This table shouldn't be here. My wife put the table here.
Yeah. Always, yeah. And it's like, yeah, there's a big difference between like being a victim and then being like the owner. And it's like when you step into the other side of it, it's like, okay, I stubbed my toe, silly me. I know the table's there. I will try and avoid it next time. Done. It's like there's no layer of thinking on top of that needs to be applied, because more often than not, with any thought that we have, there's nothing more that needs to be done with it. It's just a thought. It could be a thought about the dinner you had last Thursday, or that girl you used to date 5 years ago, or the things you got to do later today, or it could be anything. You just don't know. And it's like sometimes more often than not, there's nothing that needs to be done with the thought other than just see it. And like you said, step back from it, see it, be like, okay, that's interesting. And then just let it pass on by again.
was, I think of the words, anicca always comes to me, because I did a Vipassana a while ago, and I still listen to some of the audios when I meditate, and it's like, this too shall pass.
Yeah.
This too shall pass. Beautiful. So in terms of self-love, right, when I get into this, I feel like it's a natural progression from what we're talking about, because even in the stubbing of toe conversation, there's an act of self-love in there, right?
Yeah.
But Actually, the first question I'll ask is, what's been your journey been with self-love?
I think over the last, what, 2, maybe 3 years, it's kind of really come to the forefront a lot more. Because I feel like when, you know, like you were kind of saying at the beginning, right? When we grow up as men, we don't really learn about self-love. Like, it's, to us, it's a very quote unquote girly thing, right? And it's like we don't really indulge in it. We don't really understand what it is. We don't even know if we're doing it or not. Like, we just don't have a concept of it, because it's not something that, to focus on yourself and, like, show some love to yourself is just not a guy thing, really.
Mm.
In the society we're growing up in. And so for me, it's like it's come to the forefront as I've kind of progressed on my own journey, and especially when, you're beginning to understand more about yourself and get more in touch with yourself and your emotions and your feelings and your thoughts. It's like naturally elements of self-love show up, because, you know if you're having a bad day or like a down day, it's like you have to be able to show yourself an element of love and able to support yourself and help yourself through that day, whether that's just being kinder to yourself, or whether, going to speak to someone else about it. There's still an act of self-love. Like, it doesn't, I think we always think that self-love has to be this big song and dance, like I'm taking myself for a spa weekend and I'm going to pamper myself and I'm going to, like, switch my phone off, or I'm going to take myself on a solo trip. Like, it doesn't have to be that. Like, I think self-love can be a really simple act, and I think more often than not, a lot of guys actually do self-love. They just don't realize it because they don't label it as that. And I think, and they don't, and not even that they don't label it, it's like they don't even recognize it as being self-love. They just think it's like, oh, it's cool, it's going to gym, bro. It's like, no, that can be your moment of self-love, because you're doing something for yourself to better yourself in some way. That is a form of love for yourself. So yeah, like my journey's been kind of getting deeper and deeper especially over the past 12 months, man. I think we've all felt the need for a bit more self-love. So yeah, it's been up and down, but on the whole, I think it's a very fulfilling journey, man.
Yeah. As you said, often there's acts that we're doing for ourselves that we don't always frame inside of the idea of self-love. And I realized that I didn't even start by, saying what self-love is.
Mm.
It's like, I always see it as giving yourself the love that you want and you need,
Mm.
often from other people. But yeah, it's just like giving yourself a level of love. I don't know what your kind of definition for yourself is.
Yeah, I think that I love that, like the idea of like giving yourself the love that you want and need. But then I always come back to the thing of like, do a lot of guys know what that is? Because more often than
Mm.
not, we don't, because we don't know even sometimes how to show love to other people. So how can we know how to show love to ourselves? So I think the thing that I've landed on more recently is like this idea of just being kinder to yourself. Like,
Mm.
if you're having a bad day, just be like, okay, look, it's cool, you're having a bad day. Maybe, put your to-do list to the side and maybe go and chill on the sofa and watch some Netflix. Or, if you're not feeling going to the gym, for example, instead of forcing yourself to go to the gym because you have to stick to your 3-4 days a week, just maybe give yourself a couple of days off. Like, just have that little level of kindness and compassion for yourself. And that, to me, is one of the biggest acts of self-love, because it's fundamentally you showing yourself the love that you want and need. But you don't have that voice in your head. It's like, no, I've got to go gym because this, or I've got to go out with my mates because if I don't go out, then blah, blah, blah. Like, if you're not feeling going out with your mates, then the kind thing is to just not go, or,
Mm.
cooking yourself a nice meal. Or, do you know what I mean? It's like, if you were looking after a child, for example, and they weren't feeling well, you're going to treat them with some sort of kindness and compassion. You're not going to like berate them. And, that's what we do to ourselves. We kind of berate ourselves, and that takes us away. It's like the opposite of love. And it's like sometimes the kindness just helps you like segue towards the self-love again, in a way.
Yeah. I love that. I love what you said about if we were to treat ourselves like children. I had a woman on a podcast a little while ago, and she's like an expert in. She works a lot with inner child, And a lot of the work she was talking about is really kind of framed this side of self-love is like going, I was a small child, or I was once berated. Like, let me give myself the kind and generous word that I really desire and I really need to just feel accepted and loved and recognized. I think there's a big acknowledgement part inside of self-love. It's like just acknowledging where we are, who we are, and that is okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and do you know what the other thing is as well? It's like, you know, even if it's like a girl listening to this, it's like, we have that thing of like, oh, I've just ate a whole bar of chocolate and then I'm gonna feel bad for it. I'm gonna hate myself for it. Instead of just be like, do you know what? It's cool. Like maybe you just wanted some chocolate. It's fine. Like you don't need to always beat yourself up about little things because you think it's bad, or you think you should go and exercise because it's good for you, and if you don't go it's bad for you. It's like, just be with how you feel, and it's like by showing yourself that kindness, it allows you to really be with how you're actually feeling on that day, in that moment, because that will change. It's not going to be a consistent, just because you had a chocolate bar today doesn't mean you're going to eat a chocolate bar every day for the next 10 days. You might just have one in the 10 days. It's cool. Like there's nothing wrong with that.
Definitely, because we do it's the judgment, isn't it? It's the ongoing judgment that we do to ourselves, like where we do something like you said, the chocolate bar. We have a chocolate bar and then we go, I really enjoyed the chocolate bar. We enjoyed the chocolate bar. And then when we're finished with it, there's that, you fucking lazy bastard, you shouldn't have this chocolate bar, you said you weren't going to do this. And then like you said, we start to berate ourselves. We treat ourselves like it's like a critical parent would treat a child. And it's like, which is what I call the opposite of self-love, which is an act of self-hate, actually, which is a conversation we don't have enough, actually, is like how we inflict kind of self-hate on ourselves constantly, and where do you, I guess this the my thought is like, where do you think this comes from, this like constant need to kind of berate and acts of self-hate on ourselves constantly?
I mean, it's a big question because it's all around us. Like it's literally all around us. Like I think media and advertising have a big role to play in that. Social media has a huge role to play in that because, even advertising, right? And I used to work in advertising, and it's like you're you're constantly being shown products that you're told that you should have to improve your life, which is making you already feel, if I don't have that thing, then my life is not good. So you're constantly looking at ways to see how to better your life because you're being told that the life that you don't have isn't good enough. And you go on social media and everyone's sharing their highlights and the best life that they're living, but behind the screens they're miserable, but you're not seeing that. And it's like then you're comparing yourself to this top level of like living that people are showing off on social media, and then you're comparing your mundane normal life to that, and you're like, well, why don't I get to go on holiday 4 times a year? Why don't I get to drive the nice car? Why don't I get a promotion? Why haven't I got someone that I can propose to? Why haven't I got a child? There's so many things, and it's like we're constantly being shown our life in, well, quote unquote, better versions, in big inverted commas, of our life through advertising, through social media. And then it makes us hate what we already have. But like the truth of self-love and just being happy in general is like to really appreciate what you already have. It's like if you're, and there's a quote from Oprah, which is like probably going to get entirely butchered right now, but I'm going to try it anyway. It's like, if you, if you're always seeking for more, then you'll never be happy with what you've got, or something like that. And it's basically saying like, when you're chasing for more, 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 like you're never going to have enough of it. You're never going to have enough of the more. But when you're happy with where you are and what you've got, you're always going to have enough. And it's like that's what we don't do in our life, is we don't see what we've got already as enough, because we always want more, because we're being told and we're being shown and we're being advertised that we must have this new car, we must have this new hair product, we must have these new clothes. If you don't wear, I don't know, Gucci and Supreme, then you're not cool, or you're not trendy enough. Like do you know what I mean? It's just like, it's just all of this marketing and advertising nonsense. And tie that in with what we see on social media, where we're just constantly being told that like our lives could be so much better, and we strive for that.
Mm,
And by striving for better, we're taking ourselves away from what we already have. And what we already have, more often than not, is more than enough.
that's beautiful. No, yeah, it's that when you're striving forward, you're ignoring the present. You're
Mm.
ignoring the beauty and the greatness that's really already in your life, and you're focusing on this imagined future that is always going to be better than where you are.
Yeah. Yeah. And even if you get there, you're not even going to be satisfied with it then, because you're going to want, like, it's like if I said to you right now, do you know what? In a year's time, you're going to have 100 grand. You'll be like, cool, sick. But then you'll get the 100 grand. You're like, yeah, but now I want 500 grand. Then you get the
Mm,
500. Yeah, but now I want 1 million. But now I want 2 million. Now I want 10 million. Like, you're never, if you're always wanting the next thing, the more of, this need more attitude, you're always going to end up chasing the next thing, even when you get to the point that you've already wanted to get to. Like, how many times have you, I don't know, like, landed a amazing dream job, or like you've got the car that you've been saving up for, or you've bought the place or rented the place that you've been wanting, or you've got the quote unquote perfect partner you've been found, and then you get the thing and you're like, oh yeah, but that girl's better, or that place is nicer, or that car's better, or that job's better, I get more money if I do. Like, you're just never satisfied. And it's like, I think that this plays such a huge role in the way that we then talk to ourselves, going back to the original point of like, oh, I've only drive a Fiat 500, but all my mates drive BMWs, then that means I'm not good enough. I'm not working hard enough. It means that I'm not, um, earning enough money, which means, it's just this endless cycle, basically.
it's just this endless pursuit and chase for more. I always call it more, 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 bigger, 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 better, 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 because it's
Yeah.
the we're constantly hit with this message, and actually the message is really that there's an incompleteness with you. The message we are constantly hit with is there is an incompleteness in you and who you are and your life, and whatever I'm selling you will complete it.
Yeah. And that's the whole point, right? Is advertisers, they play on that. They toy with that, um, that, I don't know whether you'd call it a weakness, but that they play with that idea of like, you are lacking this thing in your life, but I can show you how you can get it, and it will make you so much happier and better as a person. But it's bullshit, man.
Yeah, yeah. It's like we all feel this. I say this often to coaching clients. It's like that void that you feel in yourself, that you feel there's something missing, there's something lacking. Everybody feels that, but it's a
Mm.
fake void. There's nothing missing, there's nothing lacking. It's just that when we go to that place, we don't need anything. There's no want, there's no need. But we also always interpret it as that there is a lack, there's an emptiness in us.
Yeah, and I think that's so true. And on the flip side, I think you can fill that void, but that void isn't going to be filled by having more, by having better things, by buying nicer clothes, by buying a bigger house, by buying a nicer car, by having a better partner, by whatever it is, earning more money, going on a 5-star holiday. Like, it's not going to fill the void, because by doing those things, you're actually avoiding looking into what the void is. And it's like, when you look into the void, that's when you actually see for yourself what it is that you're really missing. And more often than not, it is a relationship with yourself and self-love. you
Yeah.
know
Yeah, yeah. That relationship with ourselves that we often look externally, we're looking outside of ourselves, when actually it's this internal marriage, as some would say, that we need to kind of like focus our energy on.
yeah. And it's yeah, we look in the wrong place for the answers. And we've been
Mm,
doing that for hundreds of years, probably, as humans. We look in the wrong place for the answers. We never look within. We always look externally, and it's like the answers always appear to be external, but really and truly, we always find the answers within.
mm, Now we have a media and advertising industry which is kind of built to poke at the insecurity that we have that's there.
Yeah, and they, like I said, they massively play on that. They massively play on knowing that everyone has that void, that feeling of lack, and that they'll want to fill it with something. And it's like, we you can't fill a hole in your heart by buying more things. It's just
Mm,
not possible.
it's a great quote to take. I love that. I love that. And we touched upon this earlier around how men interact with self-love. It's like, where do you feel that it comes from that self-love kind of feels like kind of quote unquote unmanly, unmasculine to do?
I think it's this, and I hate to really point the finger at things and people and stuff, but I genuinely think it's just a wider societal thing. It's like we don't allow, funnily enough, boys to be boys. We think we are allowing boys to be boys by telling them, oh, boys will be boys because they fight and they do this, they do that. But actually allowing boys to be boys is treating them the same as you would treat a girl, and vice versa, treating a girl the same as you would treat a boy. Like, there doesn't need to be a difference between, boys don't cry and girls do, and you know boys are the strong ones and girls are the ones who stay home and help around the house. Do you know what I mean? Like, we have these like ideas that we're kind of brought up, we're shown them, we're brought up believing them, but it's like they're so far from the truth. And it's like we've some way come so far down the line, and now that we're even more connected and able to see how everyone else is living their lives through things like social media, which, don't get me wrong, I'm not berating social media at all. Like, I love social media. I think it's wonderful platform to connect with people, to have platforms like this to talk about things and everything else. But it's also, we got to also remember, we're not, as a community of people, as humans, pre the 90s, for example, maybe even way before that, we weren't supposed to live in a way that we can see what everyone else in the world is doing at the same time. We're supposed to grow in small communities of people and have a tight knit within that community. And by opening ourselves up to, like, literally being able to see what everyone else in the world is doing, we then start to question things. And I think that's why a lot of these conversations around, like, masculinity and mental health and toxic this and blah blah blah, it all coming out is because, and like race, and like there's so many things that are all coming out because now we're starting to question, why are we living our lives in this way? Why do we have these ideas about certain people because of the way they look or the way they act, or why do we not let men express emotions? Why do it's just like, there's just so many questions. And it's like, I think a lot of that is coming out because we're able to now question it all through seeing that, as a huge wide society of people, of however many, was it 60 billion people, whatever it is on the planet, we're just entirely fucked up through the ways that we've brought ourselves and our children up through the generations. And it's like, hopefully the big shift comes within this generation that we're in, because we're the ones who are now responsible for the next generation. And it's like, if we're able to keep these conversations going and open them up, it allows the change to start happening. And I'm not saying the next generation are all going to be a generation of young Buddhas. Like, there's still going to be challenges and stuff, but like, the conversation has started and it's open. And it's like, it was our fathers, our grandfathers, our great grandfathers would never have had a conversation like this, even together, one-on-one in a room with no one else listening. Do you know what I mean? So there's a big shift. So I think, yeah, in short, to answer your question, I think it's a wider societal thing in the way that we characterize men through what we see in films, through what we see in so many different areas of life, what we see within our own families, friendship circles, in schools. It's always the headmaster's always like an angry old man. And do you know what I mean? It's like, it's just like, there's just so much to it, man.
Yeah. There's a lot of layers, isn't there? That
Yeah.
we grew up with the example of what men are like, and I always think of James Bond movies, right?
Yeah. I mean,
Because I watched a lot of James Bond when I was a kid, and James Bond was this incredibly smooth man who, he would literally look at a woman and she would want to go upstairs to his hotel room. He was impervious to harm. He could get himself out of any situation, but he also didn't show much emotion and care for anybody, right? Ever. It wasn't this like loving nature to him. And we've kind of grown up with that and this idea around men and love, like as if men shouldn't want love. Men are too hardy for love. It's not something we should interact with so much. So I think for me, with the self-love, it's almost like men are resistant to the word. Even when you say the word love to a man, or you say to another man, I love you, right? There's this, oh, like, what do you mean by that? What's this, what do you want? It's this, we have this
Yeah.
relationship to the word love that's really interesting when you start to look at it. It's like, but love is this really beautiful energy that everything comes from, everything springs from love, everything was made with love. But yet we struggle to even say the word or do actions that embody the word for us.
Yeah, I love that idea of like everything comes from love. Like something that I've been really big on recently, because it's like, you know, I always look to nature. I think nature is the biggest teacher that we have in life. And it's like you look at nature, and nature works because it comes from love. Like nature works because everything plays its role. The birds eat the worms feed from the ground. When the birds die, they compose into the ground. It's like, do you know what I mean? Like everything works within itself. Everything acts as part of a bigger whole. The trees breathe in the air that we give out and then give us the air back that we need in order to survive. Trees are even like, if there's like a tree in a forest or a collection of trees that is struggling to grow, the other trees like pull together to then feed that tree to give it more nourishment to help
Wow.
it grow. Like that's an act of love.
Mm.
And it's an instinctual thing. Like no one teaches, I don't know, look at like a female lion who's had cubs. No one teaches her how to raise her cubs, but she raises
Mm.
them with love,
Mm.
because that's just a natural form for an animal, for nature. Whereas us, it's like it's become so unnatural for us to love people and things. Like you said, the James Bond example, it's like being this like, stony faced, like non-emotional, I can take it or leave it kind of vibe. It's Yeah, I think it's a big problem, because then we don't know how to express love, we don't know how to feel love, we don't know how to show love, don't know sometimes we don't even know how to receive it. So it's like, yeah, it plays a big role in it, man.
Yeah. What you said about nature was really, I really feel that you don't have to, like the trees, I never knew about that. I'm looking outside because there's some
Yeah.
trees and I'm like, oh wow, so those trees are helping the other trees. And you're like, that's an incredible innate thing that nature does. And humans have it too, like we are, our first nature is to be loving. Our first nature is to be loving. You see it with babies and children. Like I got a little nephew and he's like a year and a half. And if I pretend that I'm hurt, like he'll kind of come over and be like, he wants to see what's wrong. He'll try and give me something that I might like all these
Mm.
things. You're like, our true nature is love, but actually we learn fear. We learn fear around everything, around receiving love and giving it, that it kind of pulls us away from our true nature.
Yeah, for sure. I think, and kids are an amazing example, man. Any kid up to the age of about 2, like newborn up to toddler, is just the perfect example of a human being, because they don't carry any hate. They're not racist, they're not sexist, they're not, they don't have any agenda. They don't, and all because they don't, well, A, they haven't been molded by society yet, but B, because they live in the purest state of a human being, which is a state of care, a state of love. If they, you know if they're hungry or they're wanting of something, they'll let you know. If they're, happy, they'll let you know. If they want to show you love, they'll let you know. And it's like pets are the same. Like, I don't know if you've got any like dogs or cats or anything, but when you're ill, like my dog always knows. Like, it always comes up to me, snuggles in, tries to like show me some love. Like, they just know, because they don't know how to not show love, because it's so natural. It's our literally our purest state of being. It's our natural source is love. And we've become so far disconnected from it that we now find it weird. Do you know what I mean? It's it's,
Yeah.
it's so fascinating.
Yeah. To see that we've scared ourselves to moving away from our most natural state.
Mm, yeah.
Mm. Mm. One of the things that popped up for me, actually, we were talking about, the chocolate bar and the self-love, is self-love versus self-discipline.
Okay.
And this is an interesting question, right? Because I think there's a really important part of life in disciplining and disciplining oneself to, reaching a goal, or, maybe like earlier this year, for instance, I went on a bit of a diet because I felt like I'd really like let myself go quite seriously over kind of the winter lockdown. And I was like, that's it. I'm going to stick to this diet. I do it almost every year, but I'm going to really stick to it this time. So I was really disciplined. I only ate certain foods. I was exercising 5 times a week and all this thing. But there were moments in there where I was like, I really want that chocolate bar, maybe. And I would be like, no, I'm going to stick to my discipline. What's your thoughts on, where when it's self-love versus self-discipline sometimes, because there are moments in life where there is that kind of fine line between the two, that they're kind of bolting up against each other.
I think the thing that instantly comes to me is the idea, like, don't get me wrong, I'm really big on discipline. I love a routine. I love structure. I love having a plan, having a goal, like all of that stuff, right? You don't, you know, do over like 200 episodes of a podcast if you don't have some sort of structure or something, or some sort of
Yeah.
discipline, right? So like, I get it. I fully get it. But the thing that comes up for me as you were talking there is like the idea of like, and this is something I've been pondering really recently in the last couple of weeks, is like, does discipline squash the self-love or the love from coming through? Because, like, for example, using your example of the diet, right? You've been sticking to this diet for so long. You've probably, been keeping fit and everything, and you're really like, feeling proud of it, feeling happy about it. You want to treat yourself. That treat could be the chocolate. It doesn't mean that you've fallen off the wagon because you've had one chocolate bar, but it can mean that you're just allowing, it's like we were saying earlier, allowing yourself that little bit, being kind to yourself. Okay, cool, I've had a chocolate bar. It doesn't mean my whole diet's gone out the window. Even if you have a chocolate bar every day for the next 3 days, doesn't mean your whole diet's gone out the window. Like, you can see it as like, actually, do you know what? I've actually really worked hard in these last few months. Like, it's fine. Like, it's nice that I'm able to treat myself with a chocolate bar and then continue as you were. And the reason I say this is because I was talking with a client the other day who, without giving away too much, is she's an influencer, right? And she was talking about this idea of feeling stuck in this routine of like posting every day and feeling like she has to post and she has to do this, has to do that, because she's got an audience who are expecting a certain type of thing and blah blah blah. And I said, well, is it it sounds to me like this is feeling like a chore to you at the minute. Is that true? And she was like, yeah, it does feel like a little bit of a chore. And I was like, well, then why did you start? And she was like, because I was really inspired to share, my story and the journey I was on and blah blah blah. I was like, okay, so then how can you allow that inspiration to come back through again? She was like, oh, I don't know, because sometimes I don't feel inspired if I've got a job and I've got to post something and like the company are expecting me because they've paid me to post something, blah blah blah. Okay, cool. So then what if you only posted when you felt inspired? How would that change your approach? And she was like, ooh, I can't. I was like, why not? Because I've got to stick to this thing and I've got to post X amount of times a week and blah, blah. I said, well, look, tell you what, why don't you just try it for a week? Spend the next week and only post when you feel inspired, be it on your story, be it on your main Instagram feed, whatever it is. Only post when you feel inspired and see how that changes. Because I've been stuck in that cycle of feeling like I have to post every day, and then I've released a podcast, I've got to put a clip up and I've got to promote it. And it's a discipline, and it's a good discipline because it's helping with the work that I do. But at a certain point, we cross the line from it being a fun discipline, to us literally like cracking the whip on ourselves. And we then start enjoying it less. And then our feeling around it changes because our thinking around it changes. We start thinking like, oh, I have to do this. And like, the action hasn't changed. Whether you post something, whether you create something, whether you record a podcast, it's the same action. Your thinking, like we were saying earlier, going into it has changed. So now the feeling that you're having isn't one of inspiration, it's one of a chore. So I was like, okay, why don't you just try it for a week? Just post only when you feel inspired. See what happens. Because I've had to do that at times. I've posted so much on social media in the last like 3-4 years. It's like huge, like so much, like from old job perspectives to, personal account, like it's just so much. And the best content the content that always get the best reaction is the stuff that I post without even thinking about it, because I just share something that I'm really inspired about. Because that's when it comes through. You know, when you take away your thinking, when you take away your thinking, your thoughts, and you come from a place of like no thought. And what I mean by no thought is like just allowing thoughts to come and go, and not, you know, doing what we were saying earlier of like getting caught up in the thought pattern. What happens is your inner wisdom and your inner truth and your inner inspiration comes through. So when you can clear that space, i.e., like I was saying, act from inspiration, whether you're posting content, whether you're having a conversation, whether you're doing your work, whether you're, you know, sitting down and talking to your partner or a friend, like you're coming from an entirely different place within you, because you're allowing your natural wisdom, your natural inspiration, your natural love to come through in that action, in that conversation.
Yeah. No, I really, yeah, because when you can clear away the thoughts and the ideas, the shoulds and the shouldn'ts, the story, right? And you can connect to that space of, as you call it, inspiration. I don't know if you've read much Joe Dispenza. He calls it, what does he call it? It's not super consciousness. It's quantum field.
Yeah.
And one of my mentors, William Whitecloud, he'd call it innocence, this space where all things are possible, right? When you connect to that place and you can connect into that thing there is like boundless joy and wisdom and playfulness and fun. And when we are able to kind of connect with that, and that is the inspiration that comes through in our lives, then we can express that through us, or express that through our body, into the work we do, into the conversations we have, into the, you know, the things that we create.
Yeah, exactly. And it's again, you know, using young kids as an example, you could put a kid in a room with a ruler and a piece of paper, and they would find some sort of fun game to make out of it. They would turn it into a flag, or they'll use like the ruler as some sort of like, I don't know, bat, and they'll scrunch up the paper and use it as a ball. Like, you know, they'll find the fun in it, because they're coming from that place that you're talking about. They're not sitting there going, oh, why have you given me a ruler and a pen, like a pen of paper? I'd rather have, you know, my toys or this, or because they're so young, they haven't fully formed these ideas and these concepts that we have around the world and the things around us. They just see what is the thing, and then they express their, you know, whether you want to call it consciousness or innocence or inspiration or joy or love or, you know, wisdom, whatever, through what they do, because they're just pure with it.
Just let it flow.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful one. With the self-discipline and the self-love, it's like, I think sometimes also is that our self-discipline is an act of self-love, right? Because it's like there's maybe something more longer term, and as you said before, you know, thoughts and feelings come and go, right? You have these thoughts and feelings that come from our dysfunctional beliefs, that come from our stories about ourselves, and our own will to kind of self-sabotage ourselves. Like, so sometimes, and I think this is some of the work in terms of just being aware of what's going on. It's like when we are trying to self-sabotage our self-discipline, or when that is self-love coming through to like give us some love and compassion in those moments. And it is just to learn to kind of surf the waves, as it could be said.
Yeah. And I think that's it. I think if you don't have an element of freedom within your self-discipline, you're never going to have self-discipline with your freedom either. It's like they you know, they play together. If you're just always being disciplined and you're not allowing yourself some movement, some, you know, like with the chocolate bar example, you're not allowing yourself to have the chocolate bar, then you're just building up a narrative in your own mind of like, okay, well, if I have a chocolate bar, that's bad, I can't do that, that's not good, it's going to make me feel bad. But if you allow yourself the freedom within the discipline, be it a work discipline, be it, you know, diet, workouts, relationships, whatever, if you allow yourself a little bit of freedom, then you can experience both parts of it. You can experience the freedom and the discipline, and they work together to create something that's, you know, can be special.
Flexible structure.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. I love that. Yeah, we all need more flexible, non-rigid structures in our lives to allow us to get to where we want to get to and create what we want to.
Yeah, because, you know, do you know what it is, man? At the end of the day, like, life is dynamic, man. Life's always flowing. Life's always changing. Look how we've adapted to lockdowns and COVID and everything. Like, no one could have
Mm.
seen that coming, right? But it's been thrown at us and we've had to deal with it. Yeah, there's been ups and downs of it. There's been a lot of tragedy and a lot of loss and a lot of grief. But, you know, we've had to evolve, we've had to adapt, and we've done that on the whole, really. People are moving and acting in different ways to how they were, more than a year ago now. And it's like you have to have the same mindset when it comes to all areas of life. Like, it's always changing, it's always constant. Like, one of my favorite quotes is like, a man will never step foot in a man will never step foot in the same river twice, because even if you step into the river at the exact same point, the river has changed because the water has passed through it. And even beyond that, the man has changed, because within the space that you've taken to step out of the river and back into it, you've changed it a little bit. So it's like, and that's a metaphor for life. Like, life is always changing. Like, you never experience the same thing twice. And it's like, the more you can lean into that, the more you can allow yourself this idea of like freedom within the disciplines that you have in your life.
Everything is always changing. We are always changing. The world around us is always shifting. There's no two moments that are the same. So we must embody that in how we live as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. So we've done a lot of talking about, self-love, but I'd love to get into some practices. Like, what practices can men and women and people in general bring into their lives to add more self-love, to bring more self-love to themselves?
I think this is, I mean, I'd love to be able to give a straight answer of like, we'll do these 5 things and it will improve your self-love, but it's never as straightforward as that, because we're also individual and also different. So I think the main thing for me that I talk to a lot of my clients about is this idea of find more time, or create more time for the things that you find fun. And that can be anything from, if you find gym fun, cool, like, then that's your moment for yourself of self-love, because you're allowing yourself to go and have fun at the gym. If you like to read, if you like to go out for walks, if you like to literally do nothing, if you've got some sort of hobby, like, find more time, create more time for the things that you find fun. I think that's arguably one of the biggest forms of self-love, because we can get so sucked into the discipline, to the work, to living our lives on the hamster wheel, on in the rat race, that we forget to actually enjoy it. And it's like, if you can allow yourself the time to have fun and do the things that you enjoy, even if it means you're doing that thing by yourself, like, you're still showing yourself love by allowing yourself to do it. The second thing I'd say is probably what we were saying earlier about the kindness. Just be kinder to yourself. Like, you don't need to berate yourself, you don't need to beat yourself up about feeling certain type of ways, or eating certain type of things, or if you know that on the whole that's just having an off day, a down day, it's fine. Even if you're having a day where you feel a bit sad or a bit low, like, it's fine. Like, it's just one day out of 365 in a year, out of potentially 60 of your life, or 80 or 90 of your life. Like, it's this very small moment in time. And then the third thing I think is probably more of a practical thing, but I would encourage people to try something that gets them into either their body or into their mind, if that makes sense. So something like meditation, like breath work, like yoga, like exercise, whatever it is. Like, they're some of the most powerful things you can do. I think meditation is one of the most powerful things you can do, because it allows you to just be with your mind. Like, there's nothing that needs to be done in meditation. And I think this is one of the biggest problems a lot of people face with meditation is, I can't sit, I can't quiet my mind. Well, sorry, but that's not the point. If you're trying to quiet your mind, you're always going to lose, because your mind is never going to be quiet. So if you're going into something like meditation with an idea of like, actually, I don't need to switch off the thinking, I just need to observe it and be with it and be okay with it, that's meditating. Like, that's a state of meditation. no one zones out and has no thought for half an hour or 10 minutes or 5 minutes. If they say that, they're lying, because it's impossible. It's been proven to be impossible as well. So it's literally impossible. So yeah, there'd be some of the things that I'd say. How about
Yeah.
yourself? What would you say?
I really agree with you. Actually, a lot of what you said, like practices to bring yourself into your body, like breath work. This breath work, I've done a fair bit of meditation. I think I've been meditating almost every day for about 3 years now.
Nice.
Like almost every day. It goes up and down in time, and I find it to be very valuable in terms of, like you said, it's not the clearing of the mind, because you don't clear your mind. There's always some thoughts there, right? It's to being the silent witness of what's on the background, what's going on inside your mind. I find that's a really good one. Some of the more practical practices, a gratitude practice.
Yeah.
I did one. Someone I know set one up, and it was like you had to write 118 things you were grateful for every day for 40 days.
Wow. 118.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
And it was like, so it could be small things, big things. Like it could be, I'm really grateful for my wall and my plant or whatever. But it was, what was really magical about it was like writing down every day, even when I was in a terrible mood, all these things I was grateful for, like writing them down. And you start to see how many amazing things you have in your life that you really appreciate and really love. And for 40 days to do that, there were so many moments where I could just be grateful for my carpet, you know?
Yeah.
And I'd like scrunch the carpet at my feet and be like, I'm really grateful for that. And so some of those things are really cool. Feels really powerful. I also find fun, I think, is a really good one, is laughing. Laughing is a beautiful therapy, whether that's with friends that you really like, whether that's a movie. Like, it's one of the things I often recommend to my clients when they're like, oh man, all I do is work. I'm like, okay, what movie do you love that really makes you laugh? And, recently someone said to me, Anchorman. I was like, go watch Anchorman. Go watch Anchorman 1 and 2 in the same weekend and come back to me.
Yeah.
Because when we laugh and give to ourselves, there's a level, I think, of that fun, and love just travels through us, and it lifts us out of that kind of feeling of wanting to beat ourselves up that we always find ourselves in, I think. But yeah, some of the bodily practices, the meditation, and also something through my tantric work, and I've learned, it's like a self-pleasure practice for men. We have a very kind of dysfunctional relationship often with like wanking and masturbation. It's like we want to get it done quickly and get it out of the way. So I often try and shift my clients into like, no, let's move this into something where you just enjoy the moment by moment pleasure without any goal. And I find that's quite a transformative experience around like how we kind of deal with our sexuality.
Yeah, I think that's such a funny conversation, isn't it? Because it goes back to the thing we were saying earlier of like self-beration and self-loathing, because it's like, probably every guy masturbates, but it's like the second you finish, you like hate yourself for it.
Yeah.
And I know most guys experience that, and it's like, it's such a weird thing, because you're doing it for the pleasure, but then the second that you finish, you're like, you berate yourself for it. But it's like you said, if you just enjoy it, then it's like, it becomes a completely different experience.
Yeah. And it becomes something where you can almost turn it into like a meditation, where you're being with your sensations that you're feeling and just staying with the sensations. Because we often have a habit of like fantasizing, watching porn, and we can remove those two things and just be with the enjoyment that's there. It's like a real meditation practice, and it kind of enhances our ability to feel pleasure. So something I always recommend for men to kind of let go of the porn, because again, porn creates a certain dynamic in our minds as well around sex, which takes us away from the connection element as well.
Yeah. It creates a fetishization, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. And all these things, all the things that you said as well, it's like they all come together. They just raise things like self-esteem, like our ability to connect with ourselves and other people. There's so many benefits to bringing more self-love into our lives.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think, again, it comes down to like, why wouldn't you want to do it? It's like, it's such a powerful shift in your energy, in your experience of living. It changes so much for yourself just by, showing yourself some love, like by going on a self-love journey. And I don't think it we have to get this idea of it being this girly thing out of our minds, because, you know, we can go into a whole conversation around like, well, what is a girly thing? You know, it's like, that's just an idea and a concept that we've grown up with. It's like, it's not like being kind to yourself, showing yourself love should not be a boyish or a girly thing. It's like, it's just a thing. Simple as that.
It's just a good thing to do to yourself and any other being on the planet.
Yeah, I mean, and you know, I think again, like I'm trying to move away from like labeling things either good or bad, like, because you fall into the trap of like, well, this is a good thing, that's a bad thing. Don't do the bad thing, only do the good thing. But then when the bad thing happens, you beat yourself up for it because it's the bad thing and you want to be doing the good thing. So it's like, it's just a thing. Like self-love is just a thing that we should do. Like that's it.
I definitely echo the sentiment of the good and the bad. It's I said before, is like, it's just our ego's way of weighing us up constantly.
Yeah.
You know?
And it's like, you know, the realistic picture is like, well, who's to say something is good or something is bad? It's just what we've decided. It's just what our mind, the story that our mind has told us about the thing. You know, going back to the example earlier, like a guy crying is a quote unquote bad thing, you know, but a guy, you know, being strong and protective is a quote unquote good thing. But who's decided that? It's just they're just ideas, they're just concepts. They're neither good nor bad. They're just things.
Things that happen. They're not universal truths.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Thank you, Alex. I feel like we could talk about various topics for a number of hours here.
Yeah, man.
But was mindful to stay on topic and kind of finish up. I think that's a really beautiful place to finish up the conversation about self-love and men. And I'm sure many of the listeners are really desperate to know where they can find you or where they can work with you, or if you've got any like workshops or anything like that coming up.
Yeah, so I mean, you can find me on Instagram mainly and TikTok as I am Alex Manzi. I'd love to know, you know, what you've learned from this episode. So feel free to drop me a DM and let me know what you've learned, what you've got from this episode. My podcast, In the Moment with Alex Manzi, is available on all podcast platforms. So wherever you're listening to this right now, you can check it out there. And my book, The Search for Clarity, is available via my website, which you can find through my Instagram.
Awesome. It's beautiful. And I love that you wrote a book. It's an ambition of mine one day to get a book out written. But no, you should definitely go check out Alex's videos. He does some amazing videos on Instagram, I have to say. Some beautiful videos, like very bite-sized, very relevant to whatever you're dealing with in your life, that you can take some value and action into your life right away.
Yeah, thank you, man. I appreciate that. And I think, you know, the important thing is like, I'm not trying to be some sort of guru and say I've got all this shit figured out, because I don't. So often when I'm sharing something, it's because it's a learning that I have made recently, or something I've been pondering, which is, you know, why it probably comes across in such a kind of relaxed or relatable manner. It's just because there's literally what's on my mind. I'm not, you know, doing it to try and preach. I'm just trying to share what I'm learning and trying to help people who are on a similar path.
Wonderful sentiment. Yeah, we're always learning, and I find that teaching someone something you've just learned is a beautiful way to solidify it for yourself.
100%.
Beautiful. Well, thank you, listeners. It's been a beautiful episode. I'm sure you now know plenty of things you can take away and action in terms of self-love. And a big thank you to Alex for joining us today. And hopefully we'll see you listeners again soon. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you, man. Thank you.